Hello, welcome back to 5225, 52 Weeks of Loving Movies. I'm Matt, and this week I watched director's second and fifth films as part of my 25 series for the first month, because it's 2025 and this is 2025 challenge that I'm doing. You get it. As I mentioned in the last episode, I didn't have a whole lot of time this week because of the Oscar death race and the other shows that I'm preparing for. So I only got to watch two directors. In the first 3 weeks, I managed to get some movies from the Sight and Sound Greatest Films list on each of those episodes, and that was accidental. And then I realized, hey, maybe I should try to do that every time that I can, because obviously there's sometimes it's not going to be possible, but I should try to do that every time I can. And of course, the first time I actually tried to do it, I completely failed. I was going to do Andrei Tarkovsky as one of the directors this time because Stalker is his fifth film, but I just ran out of time. So this one is Sight and Soundless, but not sightless and soundless. It's sight and soundless. You can see and hear me, right? The first director I tackled was Paul Thomas Anderson, starting with his second feature, which was Boogie Nights. So I've spent a decade under the impression that I've seen this movie, but while watching it, I realized that because of its place in the zeitgeist, particularly in the early 2000s, and just the fact that I have seen a bunch of stuff about John Holmes, who Dirk Diggler is based on, including Wonderland starring Val Kilmer and a couple documentaries. Like, I realized that I knew a lot about it, but I just had never seen it, because once I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, I haven't seen this movie. And the thing about Boogie Nights for me is that upon this first full watch, is that although there are some PTA hallmarks in there, it doesn't feel like a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. And you know, Inherent Vice and Licorice Pizza are closer to the feeling of this movie, but it's still missing a certain PTA hallmark that I would expect from a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, and that's not a criticism. I mean, some directors need time to find their voice. Some of them change their voice. I'm sure he had a voice when he started, and it just kind of evolved over time into what we have. I mean, but I think that Magnolia pretty much put a mark on what a Paul Thomas Anderson film is and could be. And so just that kind of felt divorced from this film. But putting that all aside, Boogie Nights is a great film that has a lot to say about the entertainment industry and who we allow in our lives. And the aspect of this film that really worked for me was the found family story. There is some truly emotional storytelling in the relationships that Dirk builds within this movie. Unable to handle the strict rule of his mother, played by Joanna Gleason, which some of you may know, originated one of my all-time favorite musical theater roles, The Baker's Wife in Into the Woods. But Dirk finds a new family who truly accepts him. While these relationships can be toxic in their own right, the movie makes clear that they are the ones he needs at this point in his life. Julianne Moore gives one of her career best performances, particularly in the scenes that Amber has one-on-one with Dirk. They just really pulled at my heartstrings when just that I love you scene, and just there's so much about that little relationship, even though, there are questionable aspects of it that really, really got to me, and I definitely appreciate it. If you've never seen Boogie Nights, it's going to be a recommendation from me if you're looking for a no holds barred found family film, or if you're just looking for a fun movie. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and there's some really great actors who play some really great and fun characters in it, and it's very, very interesting and fun, as I've said several times now, I think. This brings us to PTA's fifth film, which I could have saved for next week, which I'll tell you what that is later. But as a little hint, There Will Be Blood was the best film of 2007, bar none. A funny story about the first time I watched this is that in 2008, I was preparing for the Oscars, as I did every year. Back then, I just did the Best Picture winners and as many of the acting and writing and directing, the big five, as much of that as I could get my hands on, but I always had to watch the Best Picture nominees because it was harder back then to get a hold of a lot of this. To do all of them was if you weren't part of the Academy was very, very difficult. But back then you had to do what you could to get your hands on them. And I lived in a very small town and I was a poor 20 something. So I downloaded it. This is not me advocating for piracy. We just had to do what we could back then to get our hands on the movies that were inaccessible. I also want to make clear that this disclaimer is not a condemnation of piracy. I am of two minds about this. I want the theatrical experience to stay intact. I believe in the theatrical experience. I love the theatrical experience. And I think that we should be giving money to good movies so that they keep making good movies. So I fully believe in paying for the movies and paying for art. However, I also believe that there are people in a lower economic class to whom theaters are prohibitively expensive or inaccessible due to geological, sensory, or mental health reasons. And I believe that they should have access to art as well. So if you can see movies in the theater or purchase them, rent them, however, watch them legally. If you can't, don't get caught. Anyway, the copy of this movie that I had downloaded was broken up into 4 files, which was pretty common back then, especially for longer films. But the files were misnumbered. And so, and they had removed the credits from the film. So I watched this movie out of order. The 3rd and 4th files were backwards. So I watched the ending of There Will Be Blood before I watched the 3rd quarter of the film. I thought it was just interesting editing. And while I don't remember the impact it had on my viewing experience, I did love this movie enough, even weirdly edited, to believe that it was robbed for Best Picture at the 2008 Academy Awards. I mean, I predicted No Country for Old Men, but I was rooting hard for There Will Be Blood. I did watch it again when it came out on DVD and many times after, but I watched it right as it came out, just a little bit after the Oscars came out on DVD. I watched it and found that, wow, this is even a better movie when it's properly edited and it's in the right order. Now, I would like to take this moment to clarify something, because I did just say that this was the best film of 2007, and there were a lot of good films that came out in 2007. There were some really, really great films that came out in 2007. I thought No Country for Old Men is a great film. It just, for me, was not as good as There Will Be Blood. I thought that there was a lot in competition for best film in 2007, and I don't want to come off as hyperbolic, so just let me say it's not that There Will Be Blood was the best film of 2007. It's one of the best films of that decade. It's one of the best films of this century so far. And if you've never seen it, watch it. Daniel Day-Lewis gives one of the greatest performances that has ever been performed. And Paul Dano gives 2 of the best supporting performances of all time. There's no end to the things I could say about There Will Be Blood. So I'm just going to leave it here for now, because I don't have a whole lot of time. I love this movie, and I hope you do too. The second director I covered this week was the director of my all-time favorite movie, Dead Poet Society, which I'll be covering later this year when I cover my favorite movies as part of this 5225 series. But that director is Peter Weir. Now, you may have seen Peter Weir films. I will say you've absolutely seen Peter Weir films, but you may not have known that they were Peter Weir films. So if you've seen things like The Truman Show, Dead Poet Society, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, those are just to name a few. You've seen some Peter Weir movies, and they're always fantastic. Peter Weir's second feature film is a little bit of a topic of debate, and it might just be a topic of debate in my head, and because it's not really that big of a debate. His first film, Homesdale, is 55 minutes long, which makes it a feature film. However, the consensus with basically everyone else, seems to be that his first feature film was The Cars That Ate Paris. I'm going to say The Cars That Ate Paris was his first feature film. So for his second feature film, I watched Picnic at Hanging Rock. This was a first time watch, but one that I had heard about for years because it's a very well regarded film. One thing I had never heard though was how very, very queer coded this film is. At first, I thought I was picking that up because it's about high society people and there's an inherent campiness to that. Um, and as a queer man, it's something that I'm looking for a lot. So I thought maybe I was just kind of making that up or seeing something that may not have been there for that reason. But the further I got into this movie, the more it became very clear to me this was intentionally queer coded. And if it's not, then we're accidentally made a very gay film. Having only seen this film once, I will need to watch it again to be able to properly articulate what makes it so queer, because I'm kind of discovering that as I'm watching it. And I really wasn't taking those notes because I spent some of the time trying to figure out if this was actually something that was there or something I was creating. So like other movies in this series so far, I am going to have to give this a rewatch and fully review it again later. As far as the film itself, I did enjoy it very much. It's very surreal, and there is a natural horror to it that evokes a dread of uncertainty. This was not well received by America on its initial release, for reasons I can understand, and I won't mention because it kind of it has to do with the ending. But it is considered a masterpiece in other parts of the world, particularly Australia, where Weir is from. And I think I might be able to get to that point right now. Right now, it's just something I very much enjoyed. I think on further viewings, subsequent viewings of this, I will be able to see the masterpiece within it. And sometimes I'm not ashamed to say it takes me a couple times to see it. I am the kind of person who's very stingy with my 5-star reviews on Letterboxd, because for me, a masterpiece takes time, and I can't just call something a masterpiece most of the time immediately. There are some that I absolutely do, and especially if they're older films that have endured the test of time, and I see it and I go, okay, this is a masterpiece. I see it, but it's hard for me to assign that kind of thing to a film. This is something I take very, very seriously. So I'm going to have to rewatch this at some point and come back and review it. We'll see how it improves or doesn't upon revisit in the future. And here's the thing. I've already said that about this film, and I've said that a lot during this series so far, at least once an episode, I think, or maybe just for the first 2. I'm not sure. But I did say in those episodes, I need to revisit this and come back and review it for you later. So I think I might do a series after this is all over of, picking out these ones that I said I needed to rewatch and reevaluate to see if I can, on rewatch, can better articulate or better understand certain aspects of them, because all of them I've really liked, but I think for all of them there's been something I haven't been able to verbalize about it and that I think I need to revisit. So look forward to that in the future. That'll probably be a project for next year. But let's move on to the last film that I watched for this, and it is Peter Weir's 5th film, Gallipoli. There was a trailer on one of the tapes I used to watch all the time when I was a kid for Gallipoli, and I don't remember which tape it was, but I remember watching this trailer over and over and over again. Not because I particularly love the trailer, but just because I would watch that tape a lot, and every time I would watch the tape, I would watch that, and I would have to watch it. It's weird. I have a similar thing now. I watch trailers before movies. I have a no skipping the intro rule for TV series, and someone's going to say, well, I'm normal and I skip. I know I'm not normal. Everybody, somebody always comes back with me to tell me that they do it the normal way. So you don't have to, unless you want to. Tell me in the comments if you're normal, unlike me. Having seen this trailer a lot of times, I thought I knew exactly what I was in for. I thought it would be a war epic where Mel Gibson, swings in and saves the day, saves the war for Australia. But what I got was a beautifully empathetic film about people, not soldiers, who are in war. I mean, they are soldiers. They're part of this army, and they're part of the war, but the film is not about the war. It's about these people who are in the war, which I know is a weird distinction. And you could say that about a lot of movies. It's just not what I expected this film to be. I didn't expect it to be so empathetic. And another thing it does that other war films do, but I just found a bit surprising with this film based on what my preconceived notions of it, were that it focuses on brotherhood and personal conviction and the value of human life. And I know a lot of films do that, but I'm not a big war film fan unless it is explicitly anti-war. Generally, there are some regular war films I love very much, but for the most part, for me to really enjoy a war film, it has to kind of have an explicit anti-war message, or in the subtext be anti-war. This one is not specifically and explicitly anti-war, but it does call into question the motivations of the people who are making the choices in these wars, and the people who are most affected by those choices, which all leads to one of the greatest final frames ever put to film. And I don't want you to go look for it if you plan on watching this movie. And there's a chance you've seen the frame because it has become associated with this movie. So I don't want to tell you what the final frame is because you might go, oh, I've seen that, and then understand kind of what happens there. So don't go looking for the final frame. I want you to watch this movie if you're interested. I mean, if you're not interested in watching a war movie, no matter what it's about, yeah, don't watch it. But if you're interested in watching this movie, please don't seek out the final frame of this movie because I think it has such a great impact at that final moment where basically everything has led up to this 1 second of film. I don't know how long it's actually on screen. I can't say 1 second, but it is just the final image that you see before the credits start rolling. And it really puts the whole film into perspective. It has an incredibly emotional impact. I recommend this movie to anybody who is willing to check out a very empathetic war film. If you're not, don't worry about it. Maybe you can go look at the final frame, but I think that not watching the movie and seeing the final frame won't have the impact either. So if you're just curious, watch the movie. That's all I'm saying. I've watched a lot of Peter Weir films, and you probably have too, as I mentioned earlier. But something that I've thought about for a long time has come back to me. And after watching these two films, I really don't understand why Peter Weir is not mentioned among the greatest filmmakers of all time. It's truly a shame. It's a crime. But it's one I hope to remedy with things like this. Please go watch some Peter Weir films. Watch this one. Watch Picnic at Hanging Rock if you can handle kind of a surreal, weird, natural, slow burn horror. Watch some Peter Weir films. Tell me how you feel about these movies because I want to hear about it because he's a director that I really, really love and respect. And I just don't think his name is said often enough in that conversation, and it should be. Well, that's it for week 4. Week 5 is the start of my Oscar series leading up to the Academy Awards ceremony on March 2nd. This week, I will be watching movies that I thought should have won Best Picture. And so I'll only be covering movies that did not win Best Picture that I thought should have won Best Picture. It'll be hard to watch something for the first time as the basis of this theme is that I think that they should have won. So it'll be very hard for me to do that. So there's a chance I might not do as promised with with watching one I haven't seen, but I did say if possible. I might try one that is universally understood to have been snubbed or robbed of the Oscar and see if that qualifies for me. I don't know. It depends on if I have time. As I mentioned, this is kind of a really busy time. I'm absolutely going to keep my promise of watching at least one. We'll see how that goes. We'll find out on the next video. Have you seen any of these films that I covered today? Which ones did you like? Did you not like? How do you feel about them? Are there any movies that you thought should have won Best Picture that didn't? Talk to me in the comments. Bye.